This one begins on the moral question and says people are needy, so they should take the money, and then you come back to the moral question. Yes, please, your question.
Thank you for contribution to contribute. I am Professor Electoral, Director for NDTI. I also look at it from this angle. If you look at the angle,
the national anthem, please. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for making time to be with us and to deliver such an inspiring address to all. Snappy as you can. This one begins on the moral question and says people are needy, so they should take the money, and then you come back to the moral question. Yes, please, your question.
Thank you for contribution to contribute. I am Professor Electoral, Director for NDTI. I also look at it from this angle. If you look at
I want to ask a question, but my question will be built on the contributions that we have had. It appears that some on this side believe that the scope of the discussion is not well carved, and so you get people talking about mindset, education, and all that. I want to ask a practical question for our panel members, in order to address the concerns that have come from here. So I present to you 3 candidates who are going for elections. The first candidate has good intentions, has the vision, implementable policies. But for the fear of losing the elections, he offers to pay some money in order that he gets elected. So he pays, let's say, 500 cedis to a delegate. The second candidate is not too sure, he's indifferent whether he wins or not. He wants to try his hard. So he offers a full chicken and fried rice on election day. And the third candidate, who has no vision, he just wants to occupy the position, approaches the chief of the community and appeals to him to talk to the delegates to vote for him. Among these 3 candidates, who is corrupting and who is corrupt? Thank you.
all of them are corrupt.
Scope of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Guarantee that we can enforce it against the whole political party machinery. We have the Political Parties Act, Section 21, I have just referred to, that says bring the audited accounts, show us the source of your funding, shows us dues your members have paid, contributions you have received. If we are not enforcing all of these at the start, what's the hope that we can do beyond that?
I think that for me, it sounds the most basic, but it's actually not. I feel like to be a bit more contrarian. That in terms of the architecture of public election financing and all of that, the main stewards of how we enforce laws are in fact persons who have come through that system. It is practically impossible to get elected without having gone through a system of vote buy, or at least demand being made on you where you feel compelled to put your money in your pocket to give. And for which reason, if the main persons who are products of that system must go against that system, it means that one, you are not competing for election again. And if you are not, all those who are dependent, who you require or you depend on to make that work, will still go through the system. So I am quite interested in a process whereby, procurement-wide types of deals are dealt with. I'm interested in a system whereby we are focused on the kind of corruption that we're talking about, for instance, in terms of oral and others. That if you're more effective in that, it will trickle down eventually to those ones which are harder to deal with. So if we are starting anywhere, I would start with those ones, and then we can think about how we deal with the ones where the participants themselves who we are asking to be stewards of our electoral enforcement are products of that system as well. And whether or not we hive those off and give it to, for instance, the thinking around how this office was created and others was that, okay, we said it's not going to be renewed for a mandate of 1 term because we don't want it to be dependent on a system where he's dependent on somebody's approval which will make him then compliant. So if those systems then can be paired with, or that he gets the primary responsibility of leading the charge on those, and is not dependent on those who come through that system, then that could work.
Okay.
I would say.
Right. So, Dr. Opoku-Agyemang, do you share that view, which has been put on the table, particularly by the NDC, that hive off this responsibility from the EC because they have shown not to be ready to do it anyway?
Yeah, I'll come to that, but I really need to respond to something said in our regulation of internal power. I think, so the logic is simple. You need multi-party democracy. You cannot do multi-party democracy without parties. Right? Parties in this democratic accountability structure they are agents who are supposed to ensure accountability. So, to that the process where they are sourced is corrupted, and then somehow when they become ministers and so on, they will be safe. It's not logical. The second point is that the Constitution says parties in their internal organization must mimic the democratic state, which includes accountability and integrity. And then the third logic is that the reason why we regulate doctors or nurses is because we don't want, they can go and train privately somewhere, but we don't want any fake doctors to come and inject us with things that's why the state enter. The same way, if these are going to be your managers, your leaders, if they don't have integrity in their internal process, you can't expect them to come later on and come and do that. To secure that, you need to regulate it. So I think both in terms of law and logic, I don't think there's any controversy around that. I agree that for this system, that you look around the world, you need agencies that are focused on dealing with that. Electoral Commission, organizing elections, even you can, so 3 functions that basically we need to contend with. Organizing elections, and then actually supervising parties and candidates, and then you have the monitoring of campaign financing. I think STRAJ is well placed to take that particular role, because for me, the way I see STRAJ, it should evolve into basically what is in Uganda as Inspector of Government. It is almost the ethics czar in the public service. They ensure that there is integrity in the system, okay, and are able to sanction. So if you add that function to it, I think then it is for me consistent.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. So Mariana, the point is, I'm hearing a lot about law reform, and Professor Francis Dodo's office, I suppose, I can see they are taking notes. They've galvanized and mobilized this very beautiful, an important, event, but they must be looking forward that from here, the talking points and the things that they need to drive will include this question. what can we be doing with the current system as it is, rather than focusing on law reform?
Thank you very much, Samson. I believe that, and before that, just to say that we have had opportunity to discuss with the Electoral Commission some time back, and the information is that the challenge is not with the parties not complying, because according to them, they bring in their audited reports as stipulated, particularly with the two major parties. However, the challenge is what we have been talking about, that the monies that come in do not go directly mostly to these parties. And so most of that is not captured. So for the audited reports, certainly, and they tell you some of the amounts that come in, they are very repetitive, meaning that the parties receive some monies and those they declare. What about the MP? What about the presidential candidate? Which, if is my friend, for instance, I go home and give him $100,000, that is if I have that. I don't have that type of money. I give him that. How do we account for those? So those are some of the challenges we should be thinking about. And when we talk about what do we do now to change the situation, even though legislation is very important, and I believe we need to do something about that and lead the charge in Ghana, we can also then think about enforcement. I have been to places where they hold elections and campaigning is within a 3-month period.
Right.
Is it possible to try that? That will take away all the challenges we are facing now, because as the NDC has won power today and they have started ruling, I am very sure that for those who are here, most of you who want to be president after our current president, you've already started maneuvering and doing all the underhand things. Can we limit that period to maybe 3 months? Okay, so for instance, 6 months.
All right.
If we have it within 6 months, and you are going through this country for 6 months to campaign, I believe that you won't have to spend that much.
Okay.
And then the other thing is education. And someone tells me that our people have come to a stage where they are not actually funded, and if we don't take care, at a point, people will not even be voting, because the civic responsibility as enshrined in the Constitution is not what they are seeing, because they see political actors who come into government are living the lavish life, are driving the 4 wheels, and the black ones, the Land Cruisers. Some of us have to go to China. So when we see that, then the impression is that the best place to go to is to go and be a politician and become a minister.
Right.
And our youth is not good for us. So education, civic education on what we can do to change that situation is very important. And some of the data is available to use to do so. As someone mentioned, the universities are learning from the older generation. Can we begin a research agenda where we are talking more ethics than the law? Because ethical behavior is what would then help us to appreciate and comprehend that certain behaviors are not warranted and very good for citizens of this country. Can we go back to those days when people would do the right thing without looking back? People would do the right thing without thinking that somebody would praise them for it. People would do the right thing because they knew that repercussions for doing the wrong is very drastic. We have seen that before. We can go back to that. Let's educate ourselves, reorganize, and reset that agenda to show that we can do it. And let's learn from others, like the Indians who are doing better than we are currently doing. Tanzania, we have Uganda, we have Kenya, which have offices. I do not believe, for me, that we need to set up new offices to be able to cater for this. It is good to set up new offices, but in this case, we have offices already. Perhaps maybe the Auditor General, like Kojo Seshraj, can begin to do some of these things. And let's sanction people, because the law in its current form, even though the sanctions are not as drastic, but if we start from somewhere, and we know that there are repercussions for our actions, people will be careful.
Thank you very much. I'm coming down to the audience, and Opoku-Agyemang and Dr. Joseph Whittal, you have been talking about law reform, so we would like to hear from you as well. I'll return to you. We hear from you what specific